Many years ago, Malcolm Gladwell's parents visited him in New York City. He mischievously put them up at the Mercer Hotel, a place known for its exclusivity and celebrity guests. His father, oblivious to fame, spent the afternoon chatting with a stranger in the lobby about gardening. Unbeknownst to him, the man was likely a celebrity, as people kept approaching for photos and autographs. This story sets the tone for the book. Sometimes, the best conversations with strangers happen when we allow them to remain strangers. It's a gentle reminder that our assumptions about others are often incomplete and that meaningful connections can occur even without knowing someone's identity. July 2015, Sandra Bland, a vibrant young African-American woman, drove from Chicago to Texas for a job interview at her alma mater, Prairie View A&M University. She was known for her inspiring online videos and community involvement. After landing the job, she was pulled over by a police officer for a minor traffic infraction. The encounter, captured on video, escalated quickly. Bland questioned the officer's authority, leading to a tense and ultimately tragic confrontation. She was arrested and 3 days later died by suicide in her jail cell. This incident became a flashpoint in the national conversation about race, policing, and the dangers of miscommunication between strangers. Sandra Bland's case was not isolated. It occurred during a period marked by several high-profile incidents of police violence against Black Americans. Names like Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, and Walter Scott became symbols of a broader civil rights struggle. The Black Lives Matter movement emerged, demanding justice and systemic change. Yet the national debate often became polarized, with one side focusing on racism and the other on individual detail. Gladwell points out that both perspectives have merit, but neither fully addresses the complexity of these encounters between strangers. The challenge lies in understanding both the forest and the trees. Gladwell argues that modern society constantly brings us into contact with strangers, people whose backgrounds, beliefs, and intentions differ from our own. Unlike in the past, when conflicts and interactions were mostly among neighbors or familiar groups, today's world is filled with encounters between people who know little about each other. Story of Cortés and Montezuma illustrates this. Two leaders from vastly different cultures meeting for the first time struggled to understand each other through layers of translation and cultural codes. This historical example highlights the enduring difficulty of making sense of strangers, a challenge that persists in our daily lives. Cortés met Montezuma, neither side truly understood the other. Communication required multiple translators and cultural nuances were easily lost. Montezuma's speech, for example, was interpreted by the Spanish as a surrender, but in reality it may have been a subtle assertion of power. This misunderstanding had catastrophic consequences, leading to war and the destruction of the Aztec civilization. Gladwell uses this story to show how easily meaning can be distorted when we interact with strangers, especially across cultural divides. The lesson: even with the best intentions, our efforts to understand others can go terribly wrong. Today we face similar challenges. Whether it's a traffic stop, a job interview, or a diplomatic negotiation, we rely on a set of strategies to interpret strangers' words and intentions. Gladwell introduces a series of real-world cases, some from the news, others from history, where these strategies failed. From the false conviction of Amanda Knox to the exposure of spies and the tragic death of Sylvia Plath, each story reveals the pitfalls of our assumption. The central question: why do we so often get it wrong when trying to understand people we don't know? Gladwell frames his book around the stranger problem, the persistent difficulty we have in accurately assessing the intentions, honesty, and character of people we don't know. He suggests that our traditional methods of making sense of strangers are flawed. Whether we rely on gut feelings, detailed interviews, or even polygraph tests, we are often misled. The consequences can be profound, affecting everything from criminal justice to international relations. Gladwell's goal is to analyze these strategies, critique them, and explore how we might do better. Book's first major section, Spies and Diplomats, opens with the story of Florentino Aspalaga, a high-ranking Cuban intelligence officer who defected to the United States in 1987. Aspalaga revealed that nearly all of the CIA's agents in Cuba were actually double agents working for Havana. The CIA, despite its expertise and resources, had been completely deceived. This revelation sent shockwaves through the intelligence community and raised a troubling question: how could such skilled professionals be so thoroughly fooled by strangers? Aspalaga's defection was dramatic. He smuggled his girlfriend across the border in the trunk of his car, drove from Bratislava to Vienna, and walked into the U.S. Embassy declaring himself a Cuban intelligence officer. His information was so sensitive that Cuban agents later tried to assassinate him. When debriefed, Aspalaga revealed that dozens of supposed CIA assets were actually working for Cuba. The CIA's entire network had been compromised, and their most trusted methods for vetting agents had failed. CIA's shock was compounded when Fidel Castro publicly paraded the double agents and released a documentary exposing the agency's operations. The documentary included footage of secret meetings, hidden gadgets, and undercover officers. The CIA, considered the world's most sophisticated intelligence service, had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. This episode illustrates how even the most experienced professionals can be deceived by strangers who are skilled at hiding their true intention. How did the CIA miss the signs? Despite extensive files and regular polygraph tests, the agency's counterintelligence division found nothing suspicious. Some agents even passed lie detector tests, while others failed but were still trusted. The professionals believed their judgment, honed over years of experience, was more reliable than any machine, yet their confidence proved misplaced. Gladwell uses this example to introduce his first puzzle: why can't we tell when a stranger is lying to our face? Next story shifts to 1938, when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain sought to avert war by meeting Adolf Hitler face to face. Chamberlain believed that personal interaction would allow him to judge Hitler's intentions accurately. After several meetings, Chamberlain concluded that Hitler could be trusted. History, of course, proved him disastrously wrong. This episode raises another puzzle: can meeting someone in person actually make us worse at judging their character? Chamberlain wasn't alone in misreading Hitler. Other experienced diplomats like Lord Halifax and Ambassador Neville Henderson also spent time with Hitler and concluded he wanted peace. In contrast, those who never met Hitler, like Winston Churchill, saw him more clearly as a threat. Gladwell points out that the people with the most direct contact were often the most deceived. This challenges our belief that personal interaction is the best way to assess strangers. Same pattern appears in the criminal justice system. Judges, faced with deciding whether to grant bail, rely on personal impressions formed during brief courtroom encounters. They believe that seeing and hearing defendants helps them make better decisions. However, a study comparing judges' decisions to those made by a computer algorithm found that the machine, using only basic data like age and criminal record, was far more accurate at predicting who would reoffend. The extra information judges gained from face-to-face meetings actually made their decisions worse. Study by economist Sendhil Mullainathan and his team analyzed over 500,000 bail cases in New York City. The algorithm, with access to only a fraction of the information available to judges, outperformed humans by a significant margin. It identified high-risk defendants more accurately and recommended release for those less likely to commit new crimes. This finding is both surprising and unsettling. Our intuition about strangers can be less reliable than a simple statistical model. How do we trust our ability to judge strangers? Gladwell introduces the concept of the illusion of asymmetric insight, the belief that we know others better than they know us, and that we can see into their hearts based on limited clues. Psychologists have shown that people are quick to interpret random behaviors or word choices as revealing deep truths about strangers, while dismissing similar clues about themselves as meaningless. This bias leads us to overestimate our understanding of others and underestimate the complexity of their inner lives. In the next section, Gladwell explores the idea of default to truth, our tendency to believe that others are telling the truth even when there are signs of deception. This default is generally adaptive, allowing society to function smoothly, but it also makes us vulnerable to liars and manipulators. The story of Ana Montes, a star analyst at the Defense Intelligence Agency who turned out to be a Cuban spy, illustrates how even the most trusted individuals can betray us, and how our default to truth blinds us to warning signs. Ana Montes was highly respected, repeatedly promoted, and even received a medal from the CIA. When suspicions arose about her loyalty, her colleagues found no evidence of wrongdoing. She passed polygraph tests and had no obvious red flags, yet for years she was secretly passing sensitive information to Cuba. Her story demonstrates how easily our trust can be misplaced, especially when we rely on surface impressions and institutional procedure. The case against Montes began with a series of coincidences. She arranged a key meeting just before a major international incident, left work unexpectedly during a crisis, and had connections that seemed too convenient. Yet when investigated, her explanations appeared plausible. Her colleagues trained to detect deception were reassured by her confidence and composure. This highlights how easily we can be swayed by the appearance of normalcy, even in the face of suspicious circumstances. Montes' story is not unique. Many of the most damaging spies in history were not master manipulators, but rather ordinary people who exploited our tendency to assume the best about others. Gladwell argues that our default to truth is both a strength and a weakness. It allows us to build relationships and cooperate, but it also leaves us open to betrayal. The challenge is to find a balance between trust and skepticism when dealing with strangers. Gladwell explores how we often misinterpret the signals that strangers send. Cultural differences, personal quirks, and situational factors can all distort the messages we receive. For example, Montezuma's use of reverential language was misunderstood by the Spanish as submission, when it was actually a display of power. Similarly, in modern contexts, we may misread nervousness as guilt or confidence as honesty. These errors can have serious consequences, from wrongful convictions to diplomatic disasters. Consequences of misjudging strangers are often severe. In the criminal justice system, innocent people may be jailed while dangerous individuals go free. In international relations, misreading an adversary's intentions can lead to war. Gladwell emphasizes that our mistakes are not just individual failings, but systemic problems rooted in the way we approach unfamiliar people. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward making better decisions. Our usual strategies for understanding strangers are flawed. What can we do differently? Gladwell suggests that we need to be more humble and cautious in our judgments. Rather than rushing to conclusions based on limited information, we should acknowledge the complexity of human behavior and the limits of our own insight. This approach requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to question our assumptions. Historical examples like the meeting between Cortés and Montezuma or Chamberlain and Hitler remind us that misunderstandings between strangers can change the course of events. These stories are not just relics of the past, they offer valuable lessons for today. By studying how and why these encounters went wrong, we can become more aware of the pitfalls in our own interactions with strangers. Context matters deeply when interpreting the behavior of strangers. What seems suspicious or unusual in one setting may be perfectly normal in another. Gladwell urges us to consider the broader circumstances before making judgments. This means looking beyond surface appearances and trying to understand the pressures, incentives, and cultural norms that shape people's actions. We often assume that people's intentions are transparent, that their words and actions reveal their true selves. Gladwell challenges this assumption, showing that transparency is often an illusion. People may act in ways that are inconsistent with their feelings or beliefs, either intentionally or unconsciously. This disconnect makes it difficult, if not impossible, to accurately judge strangers based solely on what we observe. Case of Amanda Knox, an American student accused of murder in Italy, illustrates the dangers of assuming transparency. Knox's behavior during the investigation was interpreted by Italian authorities as evidence of guilt, even though it may have simply reflected cultural differences and personal quirks. The result was a wrongful conviction that took years to overturn. Gladwell uses this story to highlight the risks of reading too much into the actions of strangers. Ari Sandusky, a respected football coach, was convicted of sexual abuse after years of suspicion and investigation. Many people who knew him found it hard to believe the allegations because Sandusky did not fit their mental image of a criminal. This case demonstrates how our expectations and stereotypes can blind us to the truth, especially when dealing with strangers who defy easy categorization. Gladwell introduces the friend's fallacy, the mistaken belief that familiarity breeds understanding. We assume that spending time with someone or observing them closely gives us special insight into their character. In reality, even close friends and family members can be surprised by each other's actions. The fallacy is especially dangerous when applied to strangers, as it leads us to overconfidence in our judgment. Case study involving a fraternity party at Stanford University reveals how misunderstandings between strangers can have life-altering consequences. Alcohol, social pressure, and miscommunication contribute to situations where intentions are unclear and consent is ambiguous. Gladwell examines how these factors complicate our ability to judge what really happened and how easily we can get it wrong. Stories in Talking to Strangers are often tragic, but they offer important lessons. Gladwell argues that we need to rethink our approach to unfamiliar people, recognizing the limits of our insight and the dangers of overconfidence. By learning from past mistakes, we can develop more thoughtful and effective ways of interacting with strangers, both as individuals and as a society. Institutions like the CIA or the criminal justice system are designed to help us manage the risks of dealing with strangers. However, they are only as effective as the people who run them. Gladwell shows that institutional procedures such as polygraph tests or security clearances can be easily circumvented by those determined to deceive. The solution is not to abandon these systems, but to use them more wisely and with greater awareness of their limitation. One of the key takeaways from Gladwell's work is the value of doubt. Rather than rushing to judgment, we should be willing to question our assumptions and remain open to alternative explanations. Doubt is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary tool for navigating the complexities of human interaction. By embracing uncertainty, we can avoid some of the most common pitfalls in dealing with strangers. Empathy and active listening are essential skills for understanding strangers. Gladwell encourages us to listen more and talk less, to seek out the perspectives of others, and to recognize the limits of our own knowledge. By approaching strangers with curiosity and respect, we can build bridges across differences and reduce the risk of misunderstanding. While technology like algorithms and surveillance can help us make better decisions about strangers, it is not a panacea. Machines can process vast amounts of data, but they lack the human capacity for empathy and moral judgment. Gladwell warns against relying too heavily on technology and advocates for a balanced approach that combines data with human insight. Self-awareness is crucial when dealing with strangers. Gladwell suggests that we need to be honest about our own biases and limitations. By reflecting on our experiences and learning from our mistakes, we can become more effective at navigating unfamiliar situations. This process requires humility and a willingness to change. Cultural sensitivity is another key factor in understanding strangers. Gladwell's stories show that cultural differences can lead to misunderstandings, even among well-intentioned people. By educating ourselves about other cultures and being mindful of our own assumptions, we can reduce the risk of miscommunication and build more inclusive communities. Gladwell argues that we should be willing to give strangers the benefit of the doubt and offer second chances when appropriate. People can change, and our initial impressions are often incomplete or inaccurate. By remaining open to new information and allowing for growth, we can foster a more compassionate and just society. Mistakes in judging strangers are inevitable, but they can also be valuable learning opportunities. Gladwell encourages us to reflect on our errors, understand their causes, and use them to improve our future interactions. By adopting a growth mindset, we can turn setbacks into progress. Stereotypes and prejudices are major obstacles to understanding strangers. Gladwell urges us to challenge these mental shortcuts and approach each person as an individual. By resisting the urge to categorize others based on superficial traits, we can make more accurate and fair judgments. Curiosity is a powerful antidote to misunderstanding. Gladwell suggests that we approach strangers with a genuine desire to learn and understand. Asking questions, seeking out diverse perspectives, and being open to surprise can help us overcome our biases and build deeper connections. Trust is essential for social cohesion, but it must be built carefully. Gladwell advises that we balance openness with caution, especially when dealing with unfamiliar people. By setting appropriate boundaries and verifying information, we can protect ourselves without becoming cynical or closed off. Gladwell returns to the story of Sandra Bland, emphasizing that her tragic encounter was not just the result of individual failings, but of systemic problems in how we approach strangers. If society were more thoughtful and self-aware, such tragedies might be avoided. The lesson is clear: we must do better at making sense of strangers for the sake of justice and humanity. Gladwell calls for collective soul-searching about how we interact with strangers. He urges us to move beyond simplistic explanations and engage in honest reflection about our own biases and limitations. By doing so, we can create a more just and understanding society where tragedies like Sandra Bland's are less likely to occur. Talking to Strangers is ultimately a book about humility, empathy, and the complexity of human interaction. Gladwell reminds us that strangers are not easy to understand, and that our confidence in our own judgment is often misplaced. By approaching others with curiosity, caution, and compassion, we can begin to bridge the gaps that divide us and build a better world.